Dearborn, Michigan, a city known for its close-knit communities, where family values run deep and traditions are upheld. But one evening something broke that sense of normalcy. A woman vanished, no warnings, no explanations, just gone. Naima had always done what was expected of her. She was the kind of wife others admired, soft-spoken, devoted, and always putting family first. But beneath the surface, she was living a life that wasn't hers. She had made a decision, one she knew would come with consequences. She confided in a few close friends. She planned every step carefully. And then, on a quiet evening, she took the first step toward freedom. She never made it to where she was going. Her husband told authorities she had simply left. Some family members backed up his claims, but something didn't add up. Investigators searched for answers, only to be met with silence, vague statements, and contradictions. Those who knew Naima best refused to believe she would just disappear, and the more they pushed for the truth, the more disturbing the case became. What really happened to Naima? And why were the people closest to her refusing to speak? Before we continue, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true crime stories that need to be told. Naima had always followed the path set before her. Born and raised in a deeply religious home, she was taught that faith was not just a belief, but a way of life, one that dictated every choice she would make. At 24, she married Yusuf, a man chosen by her family. Their union was seen as a blessing, a partnership built on shared values and commitment. From the outside, she appeared to be the perfect wife, always respectful, always devoted. But beneath the surface, she was living a life that wasn't truly her own. Something had changed in her, something she didn't dare voice. She began questioning the very foundation she had been raised on, doubts creeping in like shadows she couldn't escape. She kept her thoughts hidden, burying them under routine and silence, but they never went away. Then she met Naima Hassan. Layla was different from the people Naima had grown up with. She was warm, understanding, and had a quiet strength that made Naima feel safe. They worked together at a local pharmacy, and their casual conversation slowly turned into something deeper. Layla spoke about faith in a way Naima had never heard before, not as a set of rules to follow, but as something that brought her peace. One day, Layla handed Naima a book, a Christian text she often read for comfort. Naima hesitated before taking it, her fingers brushing against the worn cover. She knew accepting it meant crossing a line, one she could never uncross. But something inside her pushed her forward. That night, when Yusuf was asleep, she sat in the dim glow of a bedside lamp and opened the book. At first, it was curiosity, but the more she read, the more she felt drawn to something she couldn't explain. Faith, for the first time, felt like a choice. She began secretly attending Bible study, slipping away once a week to meet Layla and a small group of believers. The moments she spent with them were the only times she felt free. But freedom had a cost. Yusuf started noticing changes in her. She was quieter, more withdrawn. She spent more time on her phone, and when he asked who she was talking to, her answers were vague. He began monitoring her closely, checking her messages, questioning her whereabouts. The air in their home grew heavy with unspoken tension. Naima confided in Layla that she was afraid. She knew Yusuf suspected something. She knew that if he found out the truth, there would be no turning back. And what she didn't know was that he was already watching. Naima's world had started to shrink. Every step she took, every conversation she had, felt like it was being monitored. Yusuf's watchful eyes were always on her, his questions growing sharper, his patience wearing thin. He wasn't the kind of man who raised his voice often, but his silence spoke louder than words. She felt it in the way he hovered when she used her phone, in the way he asked about her whereabouts even when she had only stepped out for a few minutes. She tried to act normal, to push down the growing fear inside her, but she knew something had changed. Yusuf was no longer just suspicious. He was certain she was hiding something, and he wasn't going to let it go. One evening, she reached for her phone only to find it missing from where she had left it. Her heart pounded as she searched the house, but deep down, she already knew where it was. When she found Yusuf sitting at the dining table, scrolling through her messages, her breath caught in her throat. "You've been talking to her," he said, his voice calm but heavy with accusation. Naima's mind raced. She wanted to lie, to explain it away, but the evidence was right there in his hands. He had seen the messages, her conversations with Lila, the Bible verses she had saved, the plans she had made to attend another study session. Yusuf didn't yell, he didn't lash out. Instead, he set the phone down, folded his hands, and spoke in a tone that sent a chill through her. "You are my wife. You are not leaving this faith." From that moment on, Naima's life became a prison. Her phone was taken away. She was no longer allowed to go to work. Anytime she left the house, she was accompanied by a family member. Even within her own home, she felt like a stranger, walking on unstable ground, unsure of what would set Yusuf off next. Layla grew concerned when Naima suddenly stopped responding. Days passed, then weeks, with no word. She called the pharmacy and was told that Naima had quit. It didn't make sense. The last time they had spoken, Naima had been desperate to leave, determined to start a new life. Layla knew something was wrong. Naima, trapped inside the walls of her own home, knew it too. But she also knew something else. Yusuf wasn't going to let her go easily. Naima knew she couldn't stay much longer. Every day felt like a countdown, but to what? She wasn't sure. The walls around her had closed in, and she had no doubt that Yusuf was watching her every move. Conversations were monitored, doors were locked, and any sign of resistance was met with quiet but firm reminders that she belonged to this home, to this life. But Naima had already made up her mind. She had been planning for weeks, hiding bits of money when she could, memorizing routes in her head, preparing for the moment she would finally leave. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but the alternative, staying, was no longer an option. One night, while Yusuf was asleep, she moved carefully through the house. Every creak in the floorboard sent a chill up her spine. She had packed nothing but a small purse tucked under her coat, her heart pounding as she reached the front door. The lock clicked, and for a split second she thought she was free. Then she heard a noise behind her. Yusuf was standing in the hallway, his expression unreadable in the dim light. He didn't raise his voice, didn't lunge toward her, but the message was clear. He had been expecting this. Naima felt her chest tighten. There was no way out. The next morning, Layla received a message from an unknown number. It was short, just a plea to meet in secret. Naima had managed to get access to a neighbor's phone for just long enough to send it. When they met later that evening, Naima was shaking. She spoke in hushed tones, her words rushed, desperate. She told Layla everything, how Yusuf had tightened his grip, how she had tried to leave and failed. She was terrified, but she was also ready to try again. She needed help. Layla didn't hesitate. Together, they made a plan. A new place for Naima to stay, a way to get her documents, an escape route that wouldn't fail this time. Naima held on to the hope that, in just a few more days, she would finally be free. But she never got the chance. When Naima failed to show up at their meeting spot the next day, Layla knew something had gone terribly wrong. She tried calling the neighbor whose phone Naima had used, but there was no answer. Panic settled deep in her chest. This wasn't like Naima. She wouldn't have backed out, not when she had been so determined. Layla drove past Naima's house that night. The windows were dark, the curtains drawn. Nothing seemed out of place, but something felt off. She hesitated before knocking on the door, but no one answered. The next morning, Layla made the decision to contact the police. She told them everything: Naima's plans to leave, her fear of Yusuf, the way she had been trapped inside her own home. The officers took her statement, but without clear evidence of a crime, there was little they could do at first. Naima's family, however, insisted that she was fine. Yusuf told the police that she had gone to stay with relatives in another state. He provided them with a story that sounded believable, at least on the surface. They had been having problems, he admitted, but she had left on her own accord. Her family supported his claims, stating that she had been struggling with personal matters and needed time away. But Layla wasn't convinced. She knew Naima wouldn't have left without telling her. A missing persons report was eventually filed, but without any immediate evidence of foul play, there was no urgency in the investigation. Days turned into weeks. The community, divided between those who believed Yusuf's story and those who suspected something was being hidden, was left with unanswered questions. As time passed, whispers began to circulate. Some neighbors recalled hearing an argument the night Naima disappeared. Others noticed that Yusuf had been acting strangely, avoiding conversations, keeping to himself more than usual. Then, a discovery was made that changed everything. Weeks had passed since Naima had last been seen, and the unease in the community had only grown stronger. Layla refused to stay silent. She kept pushing for answers, reaching out to anyone who might have seen or heard something. But every lead seemed to go nowhere. Then, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A sanitation worker in a neighboring town had noticed something unusual: a discarded suitcase left near an empty lot. It had been sitting there for days, ignored by passers-by, but something about it seemed off. When the authorities were called to investigate, what they found inside left no doubt. Naima had never left on her own. The news spread quickly. Law enforcement immediately turned their attention back to Yusuf, whose carefully constructed story began to unravel under scrutiny. His behavior in the days following Naima's disappearance was now being examined more closely. Security footage from a local gas station placed him near the area where the suitcase had been found. Receipts showed that he had purchased cleaning supplies just days before Naima vanished. Investigators obtained a warrant to search the home. What they found inside painted a chilling picture. Sections of the carpet had been removed. There were inconsistencies in Yusuf's timeline. A neighbor recalled seeing him loading heavy bags into his car late at night. When questioned again, Yusuf maintained his innocence, but his answers were laced with contradictions. He insisted Naima had left willingly, yet he struggled to explain why her belongings were still in the house, why her phone had never been used again, why he had made no attempt to contact her since her supposed departure. As the pressure mounted, detectives knew they were getting closer to the truth. But the most damning evidence was yet to come. For weeks, there had been no sign of Naima. The case had gone cold, with authorities treating her disappearance as a voluntary departure. But Layla refused to believe it. She kept pushing, demanding answers, refusing to let Naima's story be forgotten. Then, a break in the case changed everything. Investigators had been going over Naima's last known movements when they uncovered something unusual. Yusuf had been making regular trips to a storage facility across town. A unit rented in his name had been accessed multiple times in the days following Naima's disappearance. The discovery raised red flags, and a warrant was quickly secured to search the unit. Inside, authorities found items that should not have been there: Naima's purse, pieces of her clothing, and personal belongings she never would have left behind. Dust covered most of the items, as if they had been discarded in a hurry. Alongside her, things were cleaning supplies, heavy-duty plastic coverings, and tools that raised even more questions. Detectives began piecing together what had happened. Naima had been planning her escape, but Yusuf had likely found out. Investigators believed he had tricked her into getting into his car, perhaps under the pretense of talking things through or giving her space. What happened next? They could only theorize, but one thing was clear: she had never been seen again. Then came the biggest discovery of all. Through property records, detectives traced an abandoned piece of land owned by Yusuf's extended family, a remote area that had been left untouched for years. With a search team in place, investigators combed through the site, looking for anything unusual. It didn't take long before they found it. In a shallow, hastily covered spot near the edge of the property, they uncovered what they had been searching for. The autopsy later confirmed what investigators already suspected: Naima had lost her life the same night she vanished. With this discovery, the case was no longer just a missing persons investigation. It was something much bigger. The arrest of Yusuf sent shockwaves through the community. Some refused to believe he was capable of such a crime, while others saw it as the long-overdue reckoning for a man who had always controlled Naima's life. In the courtroom, the tension was heavy. Yusuf sat stone-faced as the charges were read: premeditated homicide. He pleaded not guilty, claiming he had been framed, that someone was trying to destroy his life. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. Witnesses were called to the stand. Layla was one of the first. She spoke about Naima's growing fears, her plans to leave, and how she had confided in her about the dangers she faced. She described how Naima had secretly embraced Christianity, knowing the risks, but believing in her right to choose her own path. The congregation members from her church followed, sharing how she had become a part of their community, attending Bible study in secret, and making preparations for a new life, one that had been cut short. But the most heartbreaking testimonies came from Naima's own family. Some refused to believe Yusuf was guilty, insisting he had been a good husband, that Naima had simply lost her way. Others, however, demanded justice, saying they had seen her suffer in silence for too long. The division in the family was painful to watch, exposing deep-rooted beliefs that could never be reconciled. The jury took only a few hours to reach a decision. The verdict was clear: guilty. The judge did not hesitate in delivering the sentence. Yusuf would spend the rest of his life behind bars, with no chance of ever being released. Outside the courtroom, Layla addressed the media, her voice steady but filled with sorrow. She called for more awareness about the silent struggles many women face, trapped between faith, family, and their own personal beliefs. She spoke about Naima's courage, her determination to find her own path, and the tragic reality that she never got the chance. Days later, a memorial was held in Naima's honor. The church where she had secretly sought comfort was filled with those who had loved and supported her. There were prayers, candles, and moments of silence. But the most powerful part of the ceremony came when Layla stepped forward, holding a single photo of Naima, the same one she had given to police when she first went missing. It was a reminder of the life that had been taken too soon, but also of the strength Naima had shown in her final days. Though the case had reached its conclusion, the questions it raised would not be forgotten. How many others were living in fear, unable to break free? And how many more Naimas would there be before real change could happen? Naima's story is one of heartbreak, courage, and the harsh consequences of seeking freedom. Her life was taken because she dared to step outside the expectations placed upon her, because she wanted to make her own choices. But her story is not an isolated one. In many places, faith and family tradition dictate every aspect of a woman's life, from the person she marries to the beliefs she follows. For those who try to break free, the risks can be devastating. Many, like Naima, live in silence, knowing that even the smallest act of defiance could put them in danger. What happened to her is a harsh reminder of the struggles so many face, often hidden behind closed doors. A reminder that even in the most ordinary communities, lives can be lost under the weight of expectations. Naima's journey ended in tragedy, but her story should not be forgotten. Her courage to seek a new life, her fear of being caught, and the injustice of what happened to her should serve as a wake-up call. How many others are trapped in similar circumstances, afraid to speak out? And how many more will be lost before real change takes place? What are your thoughts on this case? Let us know in the comments. If you found this story important, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true crime stories that need to be heard.